Hello and welcome to our public affairs program here at Catamount Radio. We call it Catamount Community Connection. I'm Brian Collamore, your host for the 1 hour show each week. And we speak with leaders from the business, professional, nonprofit, and today, political arenas. Our program is brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And believe it or not, we're already looking forward to the 179th fair coming up this August, 2025. We're joined today by a former or a fellow senator, I should say, and also a House member. And Terry Williams has been on this show. It's probably been maybe almost a year. So I think folks are pretty well aware of your sort of biography, Terry. Normally what I do when I have someone on for the first time, I give them a couple of minutes to let the listeners know about them, where they were born, where they were brought up, their works, all that kind of stuff, how they managed to get elected into whatever body they are. So Jim Harrison is our guest today from the House. And first of all, welcome to both of you. It's great to have you on board.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
And Jim, I'll let you go for, like I say, if you want to take a minute or two, just to let people know. I know you're very well known. You were a former lobbyist up at the State House. But
advocate, we prefer to call
that's fine, too. I don't like, well, never mind, politician. I use other terms. But tell us a little bit about your background and how you managed to find yourself where you are.
Well, thanks, Brian. It's good to be here and join Senator Williams at the same time. But yeah, thank you. I was appointed to the House. I live in Chittenden. The district now includes Killington, Mendon, and Pittsfield. I was first appointed in 2017 by Governor Scott when my predecessor, Joe Tate, who was the elected representative, had to resign due to a Navy deployment. He was in the reserves. So God bless him. I raised my hand. I was looking for something to do. I had stepped down after 29 years from the Vermont Grocers and then later the Vermont Retail and Grocers Association at the end of 2016. And I was getting a to-do list every single day. I had just about finished all the closets, painting them that weren't painted originally when the house was built due to time constraints. So eventually I got there. Pat would be looking at the want ads every day and say, well, so-and-so is looking for help, and this one's looking for help. And so the opportunity came up. I did have a lot of experience of being in the State House, representing retailers throughout the state and other small businesses. And so I felt that I knew a little bit of how the process worked, not totally, but a little bit. And I raised my hand, and the governor selected me, and I've run for re-election 4 times now. So so far, I'm here, and I'm happy to be part of the process.
Now, where were you in terms of committees your first term?
The end of that very first session, I came in April. I filled in because it's late in the session. Your predecessor is out. The speaker's not going to redo the whole puzzle. So I served on House General and Military Affairs Committee for all of a month. And during the summer, there were a couple other resignations, so the speaker made some adjustments, and I ended up on House Government Operations Committee. At that time, Senator Collamore, you were on the Senate, so we were in the minority on both sides, but so we could commiserate when things weren't going our way. But nonetheless, that was great experience. And then I've been on, I was reassigned to the House Appropriations Committee. I guess it's now 4 sessions, so and that's been a great experience as well.
Yeah.
So.
You in the House have a little bit different procedure for committee assignments. It all falls to the Speaker of the House.
That's correct.
In the Senate side, we have 3 people who will determine where Terry and I get assigned. The Lieutenant Governor, that one's already been decided. The other 2 positions have not been decided yet and won't be until we convene in January. So the so-called President Pro Tem and also the 3rd member elected at large are still not solidly in place yet. But those three people are the ones that will make our committee assignments and chair assignments as well. Are you hoping, or have you received any indication that you will remain on what is, let's be honest, traditionally the most important, or at least the most powerful committee on both sides, the appropriations committees?
Well, it's hard to say. Earlier this fall, the speaker did ask me if I wanted to return to appropriations, and I said, well, I got a tough reelection, coming up. Let's talk after the election. Well,
Jim was unopposed, by the way.
Yeah, but I beat blank on the ballot, so I'm pretty proud of that. No, in all seriousness, the dynamic in the House has changed a little bit. Obviously, the Republicans picked up seats, and if I were placing a wager, I would bet that Jill Krowinski will return as Speaker, because she does come from the majority party. However, since a few weeks ago, an independent member of the House, Laura Sibilia, has announced that she will seek the speakership. And because the actual vote is done by secret ballot in January, it's really hard to predict. Are there members of the Democratic majority, for example, they have now have 87 seats, down from 104 or something. Are there some members that are privately concerned or upset that they lost so many seats? And who do you blame? You blame the manager sometimes. So right or wrong. So I don't know, what's going to happen at this point. But I'll look, like all of us, I'll serve wherever I am placed. Sure, I can put in requests. We all do. But you want to do the best job you can for your respective communities. So, everyone has one vote, and and that's the important in any book. So we'll see. I enjoyed appropriations. You get your hands on everything. I don't always like going up there a day earlier than everybody else, but that's what it is, and you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
So.
Money committees traditionally work a lot more days and longer on those days than some of the other committees. So I was just curious about that. Interestingly, the chair of the House Appropriations Committee was also defeated in the recent election. So that will probably mean some other things are in play. But I think you're right. Usually you have pretty good political savvy. I think you will see Jill Krowinski back as the Speaker. And my guess is that you will at least be afforded the opportunity to go back on that Appropriations Committee. So that gives folks a sense of Jim Harrison, who represents 4 towns, Chittenden, Killington, Mendon, and Pittsfield. And 3 of those are in the Senate district. And we'll turn the mic over now to Terry Williams and see how he's feeling about the election and maybe looking ahead a little bit. Pittsfield was and still is in Rutland County, but not in the senatorial district of Rutland County. We had a little flip-flop. We picked up Mount Holly in the last redistricting and gave up Pittsfield. So all in all, it's same kind of situation. We have 27 towns between us that we represent. So, Terry, welcome back. Senator Williams, I should say. And I know we have, as I mentioned, only one of the people in place that will make decisions down the road. You can speculate, as we have with Representative Harrison. My guess is that Phil Baruth will probably be reelected as the Senate pro tem. And I hear tell that Senator Lyons from Addison is also interested in the 3rd member position. And if that all comes true, those will be the 3 people that decide. But we'll be given the opportunity to let our feelings be known. Traditionally, it's a 3-choice kind of thing. So they'll say, what's your number 1 pick for a committee? What's number 2 and what's number 3? I know in your first term, and you're just finished your first term, you put certain things down, and you didn't get any of them, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So where do you want to go next?
Well, first, it's a pleasure to be here among giants in the state legislature. I really appreciate being here with you. I actually want to be on natural resources and energy, and I want to stay on the education committee.
Okay.
So last time, The only one that really connected with me to ask me my opinion was where I wanted to go was Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman. Mm-hmm. And I told him what I wanted, and I got just exactly the opposite of what I told him. I listed the 5 Senate seats that I wanted, the committee seats. So this time I'm not going to tell anybody anything, but except I did tell the minority leader, Randy Brock, what I wanted. And hopefully I have been approached by one wannabe committee members on the morning committee would ask me if I'd be interested in the Judiciary Committee. I told him I'd get back to him because that conflicts with the Senate Natural Resources and Energy.
Yeah.
So it's a game. You got to learn how to play it. The best thing to do is don't get caught up in it, and talk to your members and come up with an agreement what's best for the party.
You know, you bring up an interesting point, Terry. 12, 14 years ago, I had absolutely no idea about the General Assembly or any particular attraction to be part of it. It just, things worked out the way they did. But I think I had 2 great mentors in Peg Flory and Kevin Mullen, who both told me, for goodness sakes, in your first term, so your first 2 years, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you have that for a reason. You're supposed to listen twice as often as you speak. So even on the floor, don't get up and say something if you're not 100% sure what you want to say and that it makes some sense, because you'll fall into this trap of everybody standing up all the time and saying stuff that really, I'm not saying it's inappropriate, but it just doesn't add anything. And so from your point of view, I really, and Jim, of course, had the advantage of being, as he says, an advocate for many years, so kind of understood the give and take of the both chambers, and they are totally different chambers. Did you go up with that idea of, well, I'm going to go up there and show those people how it's done kind of thing, and then now you feel a little bit differently, or did you go up, as I did, with Peg and Kevin's, encouragement to just be quiet, just don't say anything and listen and learn? So
I went up. I just want to be on the team.
Okay.
And we've got a good team. We just don't have enough members. So, what we need is depth on the bench. We're working on that. But I went up there initially when I started running. I ran 3 times before I finally got elected. They figured I wasn't going to go away, so they finally elected me. But I think that I just went up there. First, I got involved because a bill passed that angered me. Mm-hmm. And after 6 years, I figured out that anger doesn't do you any good up there. And then I got into the Senate, and I saw what really goes on up there and realized that we have more problems than what angered me. So what kind of things did you learn from being, at the end of your first term that you just never realized about the legislature before? Well, the inner workings, I was in the military for 35 years, 3 days shy of 35. And one of the things that was a big deal in the peacetime Army was organizational effectiveness. And when I looked around at how everything is organized in our state government, I was disappointed. So one of the things that I want to bring to the Senate floor and the caucus is that the only thing I really have to offer, common sense, and my experience working with people, and that I think will be a winning combination.
Yeah. What impressed me as I remember back, and this will be my 11th year coming up, is how slowly everything works. You have the impression maybe from the outside looking in that something can happen very quickly. And, we have done that before in times of emergency where we have to act quickly to, solve some physical problems in the structure out there. But for the most part, it takes years before something actually happens. And that always kind of, I don't know if it surprised me or disappointed me, maybe a little bit of both. You have the feeling that, well, we're going to get this done quickly, and it just never seems to work out. And then sometimes the bills that we pass, a year later, we find out, oh, my goodness, we never even thought about that unintended consequence. and now we got to go back and fix it.
Yeah. I'll give you an example. Is the property tax increase. That was a result of Act 127, which was passed in 2022. And so we're dealing now with something that legislators that probably aren't even in the State House enacted, and I'm getting beat up about it, and I wasn't even in the legislature. Yeah. So, you have to have tough skin. You have to realize that people are upset, and they were. And then you have to realize that we all have to work together, the people and the legislature.
Yeah.
And
if I may, Terry, you bring up an excellent point, but what is perhaps unique in Vermont that is not so much so in the bigger states, but we are really a citizen legislature. And, we have 150 House members, 30 senators, and this is not their profession. I mean, we have come from different backgrounds. We have a different lens when we look at things. We represent different communities, and if we agreed on everything, it would be really too bad. We need to have some disagreement. And it will be interesting to see, I think, when we get into the new legislature, because the numbers have changed. There's clearly, there was from the Republican standpoint, there was a hope and a goal of getting to a point that you could, either the Senate or the House could sustain vetoes. Well, what does that mean? Yeah, the House and the Senate can sustain vetoes if Republicans stick together. But it means if it's football season, we have a really good red zone defense. We can stop anything via the governor from being enacted. But our offense is still short. It's going to be hard to move that ball forward unless the other party agrees to what we're talking about. But at the end of the day, it's going to force conversations. Maybe Act 127 would have been done a little differently. I don't know. That would be hindsight at this point. And I don't know that, quite frankly, when Act 127 was passed, if people really understood what the change might result with in spending, which then ultimately, influence taxes.
So that goes back to my point about organizational effectiveness, is that when an act is passed in the end of a biennium, and the implementation date isn't until 2 years later, and you only have a 2-year session, you almost have to have 4 sessions under your belt to understand what's coming next year. And that means 8 years in the legislature, and I personally believe in term limits. So how do you make that all come out right? So it is a system that we have. I'll tell you what people ask me and say, hey, what was it like up there? Are you having fun? No, that's not really doesn't fit my definition of fun. But I spent my first month figuring out where do I sleep, where do I eat, because
I'm still looking for my office.
Yeah, me too.
Up there,
we're pretty much on our own. And oh, by the way, it cost me money because they give you money for a place to eat and sleep,
and then tax you,
and then they tax you on it.
So, we fixed that though,
right? So
interesting.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting process, and I strongly encourage anybody that hasn't been to the State House, contact your rep. Come on up. Let them give you, a 2-minute tour if they can, but at least introduce you to some people, or just sit there and watch. It's a very, very interesting process. And the thing I value so much about the Vermont legislature, it's so open. You can go, I likened in my prior days, if I were watching an issue on the Senate floor, sometimes I'd go in and sit on the couch. It's like you're in their living room. You can't say anything, obviously, and you can't, God forbid, use electronics to look at your phone. But you can sit and observe, and you can't be any closer than if you were in one of the Senate seats yourself. So it's a very, very fascinating process.
Yeah, great point. I like to use the phrase, and I don't know whether it makes a lot of sense, that we, as Republicans, the minority party, and trust me, I think if it was the other way around and we were the supermajority, we would have messed things up pretty much just as badly. It seems like when you get into power, you have a feeling that you're going to be right 100% of the time, and you don't have to pay any attention to any sort of different views on anything. So that's my feeling anyway. But I think we have become relevant in the last couple of weeks based on the election results. And it's interesting, it's not just in the state, but even nationally. And there are people, again, that are very passionate about the way that they voted on the national presidential race. So I don't want to get into that. But it seemed like it was a pretty consensus type atmosphere in any state that you want to pick. And I'm looking forward to becoming relevant. As Jim said, there'll be conversations that probably would not have taken place in the upcoming months had not the election results turned out the way they did. And we're going to get into specifics maybe in a second. We've got maybe I guess we can take a break here, and we have 2 breaks to take. So let's take a couple-minute break here on Catamount Community Connection. We're with Jim Harrison, who is the House Rep for Chittenden, Killington, Mendon, and Pittsfield, and also Senator Terry Williams, who's from Poultney, but he represents all 27 towns in Rutland County. And we'll be back here in just a minute. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection, and I'm Brian Collamore, and with me today, Jim Harrison, the House member from the 4 towns that I keep mentioning, but I'll say them one more time: Pittsfield, Mendon, Killington, and Chittenden, and Senator Terry Williams, who represents all 27 towns in Rutland County in the Senate. And I did want to, we're post-election now, so we don't have to necessarily worry that much about some of the things that we might not have said earlier. Although I was a pretty clear opponent of this, and I know Terry was, and I know Jim was, this clean heat standard, which will come back. As I understand the procedures, the first thing the Senate will do is convene on the first Wednesday after the first Tuesday. By the way, folks, that's in the Constitution. And this year, I think that means January 8th, if I'm remembering correctly. And the first thing we'll do is elect a lieutenant governor, because technically he's not been elected yet. Neither candidate received 50% of the vote. So we'll do that first, then the pro tem, and then the third member. And I think it will be in that order, but I could be wrong. And then once that's done, we will take a look at whatever is sort of hanging over from the year before. And one of those is the clean heat standard. And depending on who you talk to, that was only a study. It really wasn't going to do anything, and I didn't believe that for a second. And the vote will be whether to implement what is now that sort of plan going forward to set up this rather elaborate and complicated system of making people pay more for their fossil fuel consumption. And I will be voting no on that. I think both of you, yeah, and I'm pretty sure Jim is as well. But and you have to understand, there were 4 or 5 reasons that I felt, and I've already made these public, so I'm not saying anything I didn't say before. First of all, we, in essence, allowed a non-elected entity to decide for us, and so they're not accountable to anybody either, how we were going to manage this thing, with the climate change and all that. So that was the first thing that I didn't like about it. The architect, if you will, of the bill was Senator Bray, who also was not reelected from Madison County, and it came out of the Senate Natural Resources Committee. So that was, and he even admitted at one point, and I've read this more than once, that he wasn't so sure about it anymore, and maybe it probably wasn't like the best idea going forward. The third thing was the Public Utilities Commission, which is that entity that the legislature surrendered control to, also said this was not ready for prime time. It would be far easier to just enact a carbon tax and be done with it. And then there was, of course, for me, the other part. I rarely vote for something that I don't know what it's going to cost people, and there was no clear price tag on this. We heard 70 cents from the Secretary of Natural Resources, Julie Moore, but we heard other groups go up as high as $4 a gallon more. So I just couldn't see myself voting for something that I didn't know what it was going to cost. So I was a no on the original bill and also the veto. I have a feeling that will probably fail this time, and I think the clean heat standard is not going to happen. And then I know where Terry would go with that right after, and he's right. That still leaves the Global Warming Solutions Act in place, and in that is the private right of action, where anybody that's living, literally, they don't have to be a Vermonter, they could live in Iowa and decide to sue Vermont because we won't have met the mandated situation that's in place by a certain deadline. So I don't know whether you guys want to weigh in on that, but that's how I see it happening. I think the clean heat standard is going to be a no, and then there'll be a bill put in to amend the Global Warming Solutions Act, which will take out that private right of action clause.
So I guess that's the $64,000 question. Who's going to put the bill in? I know somebody is, even if it's me. But if I were king for a day, I would, if I had one wish, I'd wish for balance in the legislature, because that's what happens when you have too much power on one side. They get to the point where, and Phil Booth did that on the Democrat caucus, said that we're going to push this thing through. We don't care what the media says. We don't care what the administration says. We're going to push it through because we can. And that's a power play.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's what the people of Vermont want. And it also says that one county in the state of 14 counties has way too much power.
Yeah, I would agree with Terry on that. The balance change will be certainly interesting and something we all have to get used to. But the clean heat standard, I would be surprised, very surprised if it goes anywhere. My expectation is that goes away, at least how it was envisioned and enacted the first time. But having said that, we do have the underlying law, which was passed a few years ago, the Global Warming Solutions Act, as Senator Williams mentioned, that has that supervision in there. And, I have asked for a bill to be drafted to take out that supervision. And I don't have ownership. If the Senate wants to do a companion bill, if the Democratic majority wants to take the lead on that, that's fine. At the end of the day, it shouldn't be because we have this supervision and we don't want the courts to decide that we have unelected officials or bodies making these decisions. If voters don't think we're doing enough to reduce our carbon footprint, then they should unelect us. That's where the power, the authority needs to be. It's not, we don't want the courts making these decisions. I mean, I guess the court could say, well, yeah, we have to do this clean heat standard, and too bad that your price is going to go up because we're just following the law, and these folks sued, and you're not meeting the standards in the Global Warming Solutions Act. So, I mean, that has to be on the table. Again, it's going to take the majority party to agree that this needs fixing. Or, short of that, you could change the goalposts and say, 2030 is coming too soon. We're not going to make it. Don't set ourselves up. We already have one suit with the Conservation Law Foundation, facing us for the 2025 information. So we can't undo that at this point, but we can going forward. So
I guess my question would be, is the change from what were goals to mandates intertwined with that private right of action? In other words, if we take the private right of action out but still leave mandates in place, doesn't that sort of defeat the purpose of taking out the private right of action?
Yeah, it does. And one of the bills that was put in the last year of the biennium was we're going to sue the fossil fuel companies.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
So, and I want to go back a few years. 1985, I was coming back from a deployment, and I was talking to gal that was sitting next to me on the plane, she was an engineer for ExxonMobil. And we got talking about fossil fuel business, what were you doing? I'm coming from a seminar where we're talking about, what are we going to do to replace fossil fuel? Because they're in the energy business, they're going to keep it going. They knew back in 1985 that they were going to be running out of fossil fuels. And I think we need to keep going ahead with research and development to come up with a alternative for that. I get it. And we need to invest money in R&D for it. But I also think that fossil fuels are going to be part of the solution until we get to that point. And we're not there yet.
Yeah, I don't think any of the three of us have ever said we're going to live and die by using fossil fuels forever. But I think it needs to have a little bit more gradual trajectory that, we continue to use them in anticipation of changing to electricity, if that's what it is, or solar or nuclear. I mean, there are a lot of different options that could be on the table. We used to have a nuclear power plant. That's gone. But there are states that still do that and seem to be getting along pretty well. So, all right. So Jim's mentioned putting a bill in. Are you going to also do that on the Senate side?
Yes.
Okay.
It's in the works.
So there'll be basically companion bills which will take, place and both will be sent to their respective committees in the chambers, and then I guess we'll see how that goes down the road. So that takes us, I think, to perhaps the next topic. One of the more frustrating things for people who went to the polls back now November 5th was the property tax situation, and that was a product pretty much of combination of things. We have probably the most complicated funding system in the country. I still maintain there's probably about 7 people alive that can explain it. I'm not one of them. It's just so complicated. But a lot of it has to do with things over which we have little control. The health insurance for the personnel involved, the teachers and the administrative staff, continues to go up. And it isn't like we can pass a statute in Vermont that says you can't do that anymore. That's just one of those factors that are there and part of reality. But I think there are some other things that we could do to tweak that. And I know Jim has been looking at this. The administration has also, I believe, come up with at least a suggested plan to reduce that. I don't think there'll be any way to avoid, maybe not a complete repetition of last year's property tax increase. They're going to go up. It's just a question of by how much. So
yeah, no, thanks, Brian. We need to get our arms around that. As part of the bill that was enacted last June via a veto override, the legislature set up a 2-year commission to look at the whole education structure in a very thoughtful and collaborative way with the education interests, and trying to how do we, become more efficient? How do we deliver a quality education? What do we do for make changes for how we finance education? One thing that was very, very clear to me in the election results last week, we don't have 2 years. You can take that commission and let them do all the good things that they're going to do. We need to make changes this coming session. And I know we can't do all the changes, and some are going to be longer term, but give you one example. We have Vermont's the size of Boston, 640,000 residents. We have 55 supervisory unions, 55. That's a lot of overhead. That's not teachers in the classroom. That's not the support staff. That's got to change. We have the lowest staff to pupil ratio in the country. Can we afford that?
Right.
I don't think we can. We're always going to be on the low end. We're a rural state. We got obviously busing issues. We don't want to see kids bused, too long. But my God, we've got to make some changes. And we've, we we talked about local control. We keep talking about votes. Well, no, I wouldn't want to close our school. But at some point, we're kidding ourselves because we can't just keep sending the bill to the state, because guess what? The state is us, so the state just sends the bill back to us. So, yeah, we pat ourselves on the back that we made the decision locally to keep our school open. We're not going to merge our high school, but we got to do a better job. So we've got to have those conversations.
So as I'm on the education committee, and I've been invited to many school board meetings.
Yep.
And I'm still trying to figure out the organizational structure of the administration of the school system. I went to a Wells Springs supervisory union meeting last night and got asked to speak, and I'm like, what do you want me to say? I think that we all know that we can't kick the can down the road anymore. We just keep throwing money at the problem. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And part of the misinformation is that, Vermont is number 4 in the nation. It depends on where you check. If you want to go back and check the data, some places, depending on where you look at it, has had us in the middle of the pack. So
4th in the nation in what?
In academic standing.
Well, I've seen something else that we're right in the middle.
Right. So and I said that, I usually like to come into a meeting like this and say I bring you hope. And I'll do that again tonight but what's happened is by raising your taxes and equating it to the education tax rate, we have awoken the sleeping giant, the people of Vermont, that have to pay the taxes. And a lot of them have come to me and said, you know what, I'm not going to, you can have this state. I'm packing up. They reappraised my property. It's doubled in value. I'm going to sell it and go to Tennessee or South Carolina or someplace where they don't tax me to death. We can't sustain that. If, we need people to come in. We need tradesmen to continue to grow our economy. Build houses. People get here for teachers, show up, they get hired at $60,000 a year, and they can't afford a mortgage payment. So it's a cycle that we got to break somehow. When my first bill in my first year of the last biennium was make Vermont affordable, the education funding bill, and I got talked out of it. I actually had people came to me and said, "Hey, I know, I was trying to get people to sign on and sponsor." I said, "What you got to do is a study." Because this isn't going to fly. I listened to the V's, the Vermont NEA, the Supervisory and Principals Association, and the School Board Association said, we want funding of education changed, but we want to change to income tax. We want it to be income-based, not property-based. And the thing is, I don't know if we got enough income in the state of Vermont to fund education with that. The beauty of property taxes is stable. If we have an economic downturn, you can always count on somebody paying those property taxes to fund our education. And it's a constitutional requirement that we supposedly, it depends on how you read the Constitution, but we have to educate our children in Vermont.
Doesn't say how.
Right.
Yeah. I have a feeling that there is enough income in the state. What will happen is there'll be new winners and new losers. And those who are fortunate enough to have gotten to a certain economic level will feel the burden more than other people will. And so they will be in that new loser group. And that's not going to be very pleasant either. So I don't know what the ultimate answer is. Maybe a combination of them. But I do think there needs to be some structural changes, whether we take a model of the elementary schools remaining as localized as they can, but all the high schools and from there up, they have to be regionally based. And that would mean closing some high schools in Rutland County. It definitely would.
That was part of my conversation last night in a previous school board meeting, too, that, nobody wants to lose their school. But, we all have to feel a little pain because it's not getting any better. The federal funding that we've had, a lot of that's drying up. Matter of fact, the president-elect has said he's going to do away with the Department of Education. So that could be, some people say it could be a blessing, and others say it won't be good because a lot of that federal funding will go away.
Yeah. Do you have any particular insights in this, Jim?
No, I just, we heard it loud and clear. And one of the reasons why there was a dynamic change in terms of the legislative makeup last week was directly related to the property tax issue. I told some of my colleagues on the Democratic side back in the spring, I says, you really should find a way to work with the governor. You don't want to own that bill by yourself, and sometimes I'm not always listened to. So
But they're
they did it.
now.
They did it. So I think they have to. And I'm not totally criticizing what the legislature did. They've sort of been a rock and a hard place. We did have to pass an education funding bill one way or another. I think we would have all been better served, even if it wasn't perfect, to find a way to do it with the governor and not make it such a political issue. We're all, to blame. But at the end of the day, the voters approved the budgets. So, it was not easy, but they approved them ultimately. So we've got a lot of work to do. And I get back to the financing. How are we going to have the winners and losers, and how are we going to reshuffle who pays? That's one conversation. The other conversation is, and we really need to have this, is how do we bend that curve on the cost of education? Because last year it was 12%. It was the largest increase ever, I think, that Vermont has experienced. And maybe some of it was Act 127 in the change in pupil weighting. Maybe some of it was the 16% increase in health insurance costs. Some of it was increased contracts because, it's a supply and demand. When teachers are in short supply, you're going to have to negotiate the best package forward if you want teachers available. So there's a combination of things. And then the federal money, when you have one-time federal money, spend it on one-time expenses. No, a lot of schools said, okay, we're going to hire some new people. And when the federal money goes away, then that cost gets shifted on to the local taxpayers. And it was a perfect storm. We can't wait 2 years. We have to address that. We have to be willing to give and take. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun. There are going to be a lot of people upset at the end of the day because it didn't go quite the way they had envisioned it. It won't all be taxing the super rich. And that goes back. Stay tuned.
That goes back to the balance of power. I think myself as a Republican, we can be thankful that we're not in the majority right now because people look to the majority to fix the problem.
Sure.
And there's not a short-term fix to it. It's going to take a while, and we got to get everybody on board with it.
Yeah, it's easy to vote no,
right?
Knowing it doesn't impact the outcome, but that dynamic will change because we're all going to need to figure out a path forward together. And I think that in the long run, that serves Vermont best.
So as we look back over the results of the election in the Senate, and this isn't all based on the election results, but there'll be 6 new chairs. 2 of the former chairs have passed, and 2 have not run again. And then 1 was defeated, and I'm trying to think maybe it was 3 that chose not to come back. So we've got, and including the Education Committee, Terry. So if you remain on the Education Committee, you will have a new chair. Don't know who that's going to be. Again, that probably won't be decided until January when the Committee on Committees makes their committee assignments, both who's on it and who's the chair. I think in the House there were at least 2 chairs that were defeated, Appropriations and Government Operations.
Right, and another chair chose not to run for re-election. Okay. So we'll have a couple
but
of new
Peter
chairs.
Conlon will probably be back as Education Chair, I'm assuming.
That would be my guess. Obviously, some people, chairs, to their credit, do put in a lot of extra time. And, some may say, you know what, I'm okay with, doing something else and contributing in a different way. Yeah. That would be my guess based on the current speaker, but, who knows how this all transitions out.
For those of you just tuning in, we're talking with Representative Jim Harrison and State Senator Terry Williams here on Catamount Community Connection. We need to take our second break, and we will come back in just a minute. We're back on Catamount Community Connection, and today we're talking with State Senator Terry Williams and Representative Jim Harrison. I'm Brian Collamore, your host for the 1 hour show each Sunday, and we have about 10 minutes remaining in the program today. So we've talked a little bit about an energy policy change, which I think the three of us all feel strongly about. The clean heat standard probably will not see the light of day. And there will most likely, although not, if there's one thing I've learned in 10 years, it's don't predict what could happen because you're always going to be wrong. But I think there will be a repeal of two of the provisions in the Global Warming Solutions Act, both the change from mandates back to goals and also the elimination of the private right of action where anybody in the world can sue Vermont for not making its standards. So we talked about that. We talked a little bit about the property tax situation, which was, in my view, the driving force for what was, I think, a surprise in many quarters to what happened on Election Day in the past year. And we'll have to see going forward what sort of changes, structural changes, we can make in our education funding system to make it less expensive for people. One of the things that I have in my 10 years up there, I've put a bill in every single term. It's never gone anywhere, but I'm going to put it in again that will exempt all military pensions from Vermont income tax for both the veteran and his or her family, their spouses and family. So that will be put in. And then during the recently concluded campaign, Terry and I were up on the stage at the Godnick Center. No, it was at the Rutland Country Club with the AARP group. And I did mention that the Social Security benefits also, in my view, should be tax exempt. And I know, Jim, you wanted to just touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's we a few years ago, Vermont's one of only a handful of states that still tax Social Security benefits on the state level. Most states exempt them. Either they don't have an income tax or it's totally exempted. You just pay the federal tax, which is typically 85% of what you earn. For a lot of seniors, Social Security is a significant portion of their income and their retirement. And I would love to see us exempt the income tax on Social Security. I think that's probably unrealistic given the cost to the state coffers that would have to forego that revenue. So I think we could do a couple things. One, we currently exempt, if you're under $65,000 of family income, you can or $55,000 or $50,000 if you're a single. I think we need to increase that because $50,000 is not $50,000 anymore. I mean, that was several years ago that number was put in there, and we've had a lot of inflation. And I think we should increase that, and then maybe also take a longer term, and maybe what may be more politically is to phase out over a period of a certain number of years. And myself and a Democratic colleague are talking with Joint Fiscal this afternoon to try to figure out what is the cost, and then we can decide what's realistic. Will it put some budget pressure in? Yeah, sure, it will. Any revenue you forego will, but that's okay. You prioritize your budget, and you live within your means. So,
and Vermont is one of only four states in the union that tax military pensions. I mean, I could move less than a half mile into New York State from where I live, half mile, and I would probably gain $5,000 in my pocket every year because they don't tax your Social Security and they won't tax your pension. So
And I did talk to Joint Fiscal when I put it in last time, and as Jim correctly points out, that foregone revenue was about $4 million if we allowed the vets to keep all of their, to keep from getting Vermont income tax. They're still going to have to pay the federal one. But and to me, I mean, $4 million is a lot of money, but when you look at a budget that's $8 billion, it's really not that. I mean, we could find $4 million somewhere, and it would not only be attracting people into the state, in my view, military folks, veterans who want to move in and settle here, but it would also keep people that are here from leaving, like you are, Terry. I mean, I know I have met a couple people that said, not just because of that, but for a number of other reasons, most of them economic, they have left Vermont. They've moved down to Tennessee or to Florida or the Carolinas because it's cheaper to live down there. But that was part of it, the military retirement exemption. And I absolutely strongly determined before I leave that Senate, I'm going to get that passed. And we'll see if we can do it this year.
I think we need to do anything we can to attract more veterans to come to reside in Vermont. We've got so many wonderful things going on here: skiing, mountain biking, hunting and fishing. And typically, after 20 years of service, the average service member is 40 years old. When they come, they bring their spouses who are typically in a technical field or have teaching skills, whatever, some of those things that we need, and they bring their children with them. So that's a win-win. If we can get more, typically they're more conservative. They've been in the military. They've had a budget process. They didn't make a lot of money, so they had to have a budget in their own personal life so they could afford to live. So I think, we need to attract more veterans into the state of Vermont.
No question. The threshold now, if I'm remembering correctly, is $10,000.
Yes.
The first $10,000 of their pension is exempt. And the argument that has been made, at least when I presented the bill a couple times in Senate Finance, was, well, if we do it for the vets, we're going to have to do it for, the volunteer fire people, and, who will be next? There'll just be a continuing line. And to me, that's a disingenuous argument. Take everyone that comes in on their own merit and decide. And then the other thing was, but do you realize how much a veteran could have as an annual income? They could be making $150,000 and you're going to exempt it. And I said, yeah, so tell me anybody in the world that deserves it more than a vet. Yeah. Just make a case for that and I'll listen. But to me, that doesn't make any sense either. So
that $10,000 threshold is if you're not drawing Social Security.
That's right.
So,
yeah, they are interconnected.
Right.
So, let's work hopefully on those two to exempt Social Security. As Jim mentioned, whether that's over a 3 or 4 year period or whether we bump it up a little bit next year and then take another look at it. And there'll be a hole created for revenue that we have to find somewhere else. And then the other one is the military veteran or the veterans pension exemption, which I feel very strongly about and hope we can do. So I'm looking at the clock again. We got about 3 or 4 minutes left. Are there any other things that either of you, and we're talking to Representative Jim Harrison and State Senator Terry Williams, want to bring up that we haven't talked about?
I would just, and I don't have the answers to this, but I think we're all understanding that housing there's definitely a big shortage of affordable housing. We need to revisit some of the regulations that might stand in the way. I know the governor vetoed the so-called housing conservation bill last year because he thought it was weighted too much in terms of putting up new hurdles with Act 250 and whatnot in rural areas. In Vermont being a rural state, that's a lot of problems. So we need to revisit that. We hopefully can get to a point where we are actually doing some things that actually help cut some of the red tape. We need private investment to build more homes, build more apartments, build more condominiums, whatever the case. We need it on all levels. So,
and I just want to make a point. You mentioned affordable housing. Right. I would also say market-based, because we have people that are professionals, as Terry mentioned, and we heard this from Judy Fox at the hospital. They had I think it was X-ray tech, somebody that was all set to go, hired him. He's here, ready to go, can't find a house. And let's be honest, they were probably making $100, $150 a year and still couldn't find a house. So it isn't just the affordable piece of it, although that is important. I think we need to do market-based situations. And we did get into a meeting the other, I don't know, it's weeks ago now, with the Heritage Family and Mike Pichek, and there is $8 million, I think, split between those two factions. So,
yeah, when we say affordable, when you increase the supply, market-based becomes more affordable. When you have such a short, which we do now.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to pick on
No. I totally, there's the public housing that we obviously need to make investments in, but we don't have enough public dollars to make the kind of investment that's necessary.
And one of the basic principles of capitalism is the competition. If you got a lot of people that want to be in that market, then the prices are going to come down a little bit. The problem, I went to buy a piece of plywood the other day, and I was shocked at what building materials are down. I don't know how anybody could ever afford to build a house in Vermont. Yeah. But in closing, because I know we're getting close, I want to thank the people of Vermont for getting out and voting. I mean, I think I heard that we had a record turnout, which is great. And you know what? People don't go back to the couch and sit there and turn the TV on. Get involved. Find out what the issues are that affect you and your pocketbook. That's what it's the kitchen table issues that affect people. And if you got a problem, get a hold of your representative or senator and let them know what your issue is, and they can maybe guide you in the right direction, or maybe you can get involved to help fix the problem yourself. Yeah,
we did have a record turnout by a few thousand votes. The governor also set a personal record. 72% of the people that voted for him. It was up from like 71.6 or something. So
the governor said something last week after the election. At the end of the day, we are all on Team Vermont.
Yeah.
So we'll work through it, and we'll hopefully make some progress. Thank you.
Well, my thanks to both State Senator Terry Williams and Representative Jim Harrison for joining us on this week's program. And we will have you back, I hope, very soon. And we will look for all of you listening next week on Catamount Community Connection.